Join me today as we talk about another 90s sci-fi movie, this time Freejack. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bobby, and today we're going to be talking about the movie Freejack from the early 90s. Now, if you've been watching the channel here lately, I've talked about a few other sci-fi movies from the 90s. And if you're watching these movies in order, this comment to make sense. But if you're seeing this like later on, up till now, I've mainly talked about two other movies, which was Class of 1999 and Dark Angel, or as it's alternatively known, I Come in Peace. So those two are both sci-fi movies, but they were definitely more of the real world plus this one vaguely sci-fi thing. In the case of Class of 1999, it was cybernetic teachers that were really military war bots. And in the case of I Come in Peace, it was an alien drug dealer. So nothing too outlandish. I guess in the case of Class of 1999, there's potential discussion to be had there, but no real like deep philosophical concepts they're trying to tackle here. This movie is far more of a science fiction movie than the other two. In Freejack, which has a number of known actors in it, unlike the other two. This movie, the main character is Emilio Estevez. Plays Alex Furlong, I think is his name. And then Rene Russo is his girlfriend. And can't think of her name on the movie off the top of my head. Then you also have Mick Jagger as Vicendek, who's a mercenary in the future. Anthony Hopkins as Ian McCandless. I think it's Ian, but McCandless. He's the big rich guy. And then Jonathan Banks, who, if you don't recognize the name, if you saw Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, he's Mike Ehrmantraut. The main, like, I don't want to call him a thug because he's a lot smarter than a thug, but the main, like, henchman type. And he's in a bunch of other movies. Like, up till this point, he had mainly played, like, a bunch of, background henchman types. Like, I'm pretty sure he's in the first Beverly Hills Cop as a henchman for Victor Maitland. And he played a lot of roles like that. So this was a little bit more of a real role. I mean, he's not a big part of the movie, but he is there, and he is drawing a blank on his name, unfortunately. But he's the second. He's the secondary guy, like the vice president or whatever, of the McCandless Corporation. And then there's several other actors. I think Esai Morales plays a guy in the movie. Vicendek's second in command. And John Shea is in it, who, for those of you who watched, was it Lois and Clark? He plays Lex Luthor in the first few episodes before he kind of disappears. Or might have got killed. I don't know. It's been forever since I saw that show. But yeah. So, and he's in other things too. So, and you'll probably recognize some of the other people here and there throughout the movie. Like I said, this was a real, this is a real production. Okay, this was a movie destined for theaters and so on and so on. And there was some thought put into it. Now, the plot to the movie, and this is why it's more of a sci-fi movie than the other two, is that Emilio Estevez's character, and yes, there's about to be spoilers for a movie that came out in, I think, 1992. So here we go. So, sorry, I just got to notice that there's a phone call trying to come through. So, I'm going to have to call them back here in just a minute. So anyway, he's a Formula One race car driver, and he dies in a spectacular crash. But important to the plot of this movie, people in the future know exactly where and when he died. Like, they know the exact moment, they know the exact location, and all that. That's important because in the future, they have devised a way to grab people from the past and bring them into the future. And they have chosen to use this technology to grab people the split second before they die so that history isn't really screwed with, presumably. And then they bring them into the future where they're supposed to make sure they don't regain consciousness. And then someone in the future who has paid a whole lot of money and has died has had their mind transferred into a supercomputer called the spiritual switchboard, which, as the nun that talks about it says, there's absolutely nothing spiritual about this thing. And then they transfer into the new body. So it's a way to achieve immortality, essentially. And I believe the movie is actually based on a book called Immortality Inc., if I read the opening credits correctly. Now, mind you, the future part of this movie takes place in the year 2009, 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. And I believe it's 2009. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure that 13, 15 years ago, we did not have the technology to do that, any of that. But let's just roll with it. And yeah, so along with that, society has devolved into, as one guy puts it, he's trying to explain to Alex, like, when you were alive, there was the haves, the have-nots, and the people in the middle. Well, now there's just the haves and the have-nots. There's no one left in the middle. And you can see in the movie that society is very clearly stratified. Everything's divided up into zones. And you've got the, like, ridiculously poor and the ridiculously wealthy. And in the course of events since he died, Rene Russo's character has moved into the quite wealthy section. She works for McCandless. And she, however, doesn't know that he's dead. And we don't know till partway through the movie that he's dead. We just know that someone is dead and in the spiritual switchboard. We don't see who it is at first. And so one of the reasons that he wants Emilio Estevez's character's body is because he loves Rene Russo and wants to be with her. So get the body of the old boyfriend, hope that she's not just like thoroughly creeped out about it, and go from there. So Mick Jagger's role in all this is his guys are the people that grab people from the past and bring them to the present. And he's got an army of mercenaries because the have-nots are kind of armed and are not big fans of these guys. They call them bone jackers because they steal people. And the law is such that someone that's brought forward in the future basically has no rights and is the legal property of whoever brought them forward into the future because they are technically dead. And by the way, it's not me defending that. That's just, I'm assuming that's the basis for it. I don't go into that a lot. So, you do see some futuristic concepts, like cars definitely look a little different. Kind of stupid, in my opinion, but different. And not a whole bunch of super advanced weaponry. Like most of the things Jagger's guys have are all like military surplus, Jeeps and APCs and stuff like that. They've got some kind of funky futuristic looking armor. And you see a few things like that. So the main technological advancement seems to be the spiritual switchboard thing. And you get, so it's not, so in that aspect, the future does look different. It's far enough in the future that they thought things should look different. Unlike Class of 1999, where it was only 9 years in the future. Things weren't going to change that much. Here, it's almost 20 years in the future. So I think if anything, there's too many changes, especially the way the real world has not changed a whole lot in that time frame. I think the main thing in the real world in there would have been the proliferation of home computers and then cell phones and then smartphones. So, yeah. Uh, so anyway, overall, I think it's a good movie. And like I said, there's the philosophical concept of the person would die if you didn't intervene. They would definitely be dead. So, is it morally reprehensible to grab them from the moment before they die? Don't ever let them know that they didn't die and then take their body. Like, I fall on that's probably still morally reprehensible because you literally have the technology to save people's lives, and what you're doing with them is you're taking their body instead. So, seems to me that there's a better use for that technology. Which, that's the other thing, is what's stopping any of them from grabbing someone who's not about to die? If you know exactly where they are in time, just, hey, we need you here in the future for some reason. And it's never really explained, is it limited to people? Like, is it like the Skynet time machine? Can only living matter go through? But of course, Alex's clothes come with him. And a trinket that Rene Russo's character gave him. So, clearly that's not the case. But in that case, why not just start grabbing stuff from the past? Other than the fact you're going to potentially destroy the space-time continuum. And Alex's manager, he meets up with him in the future, and he notes that the insurance company never paid him back because they never could find a body because he got pulled into the future. And once the concept of that became publicly known, that's what his manager assumed happened to him because he'd had a very public death. They knew exactly where and when. So yeah, there's more. While the movie uses this as a background for basically action sequences, there is, like I said, there's the potential moral debate that arises from the movie as far as the use of this kind of technology. And so that puts it like leaps and bounds more into sci-fi than the other two movies I've talked about so far here. And, very, very firmly puts it into the sci-fi category. Yeah. And then also does raise, the end of the movie does illustrate one of the potential problems is, and again, we're going to be talking spoilers for a, 30-year-old movie here. Essentially, while the transfer is occurring, Rene Russo is able to grab a gun and shoots the system and destroys it. And if you're jumping bodies, how do you prove that you're you? Because you can't use a voice analysis. Some of the memories might have transferred, so you can't use that. You can't use a gene scan because it's a different body. So what do? Well, they have a personal identification number. It's kind of like a social security number, but a little bit longer. And so Emilio Estevez rambles it off. Now you find out at the end it's wrong. Just that Vicendek really hated Jonathan Banks' character and was looking for any excuse to take him out. So then he claims that he's mechanless. And so, although he slips up pretty quickly, and Mick Jagger has to explain to Rene Russo that she's going to do a better job of teaching him about being mechanless because, he signed all the paperwork saying, hey, once this happens, I'm going to look like this guy. So now I am this guy. So now he has all of mechanless's money and power, but he's not mechanless. And so I kind of wonder, like, how often does that happen? That the transfer doesn't complete for whatever reason. And the other person's just like lost in cyberspace at that point. Because they mention there's a time frame, because presumably something to do with the digital backup that they create degrades or something, or becomes one with the system at a certain point. And yeah, so I don't know. There's obviously there's a ticking clock aspect to it. And so what if you wind up with a situation where You do go through all this trouble, then you still die, and then some other guy just takes over all your money and everything. And probably call that karmic justice. But sorry to interrupt. I was editing the video here for Freejack and realized that there's a whole other like sci-fi conundrum, sci-fi religious spiritual conundrum related to the spiritual switchboard thing. So, and this is in league with like the transporter problem in Star Trek. So, let's say you're dying or you died, because it's not 100% clear when they actually do the transfer, and presumably it has to be before you die. So they do that, right? They put your mind inside of a computer. Now, it's one thing to say that, but realistically, what they're doing is they're encoding all of your memories, in all likelihood, into, you know, microchips, hard drives, servers, whatever. So, at that point, is that you, or is that just a digital copy of you? And if it is you, did your soul transfer into the computer? Do you have a soul? Like, I mean, that's a whole other, that's the question of the ages right there. But like, if one believes in that, then are we to believe that this is not a copy, that this is the genuine article, and like your soul transfers into it and then into the new body? Or is this a soulless copy, and then once it's in the new body, what is it? Is it a person walking around with the hopefully perfectly copied memories of a person who's now dead, and are they soulless? Like, but they're a human being at that point. Do they spontaneously generate a new soul because they will continue to go on? They will continue to have experience and whatnot. And does the problem compound if whenever that body dies, they body jump again? Like, is there a limitation to how many times your brain can be turned into electrons and back? Things like that. So there's a whole other like, sense of self and identity that you've got to question here. And there was actually a study done on a question similar to this, which was they were asking people if you could create a digital copy of yourself, and it was explained that we are like 99% certain this is just a digital copy. You will still be you, the copy will be the copy, but the copy will theoretically be immortal, whereas obviously we are probably not. So, at least not in the physical realm. So, would you do that? The question was basically like, would you do that? Would you have a problem with it? Something like that. And it's been a while since I read the study, but I believe the conclusion was it was either everyone that was interviewed that also tests positive for Machiavellian traits, which is a psychological thing, which basically means you enjoy manipulating people, if I understand it correctly. I don't remember if it was 100% of the people with that were totally okay with it, or if it was 100% of the people that were okay with it had the Machiavellian type. It's one or the other. But essentially, people that enjoy manipulating people are totally fine with a version of themselves will live forever. Maybe not the meat version, but they can live with the electronic version, even knowing full well that it's not them. It's just a copy. And so, yeah, make of that what you will. But yeah, interesting result. Yeah, had to do a little bit of self-reflection because I realized I don't have a problem with it. Like, I can live with a version of me existing forever, even if it won't be this one. But yeah, I've thought through the ramifications of it's not really me, but it's some version of me. And yeah, so just one of those things. And I was thinking about this as I was got to the point in editing where I realized, hey, I'm talking about how do you prove you're you after you body jumped? Like maybe you're not even you when you go into the computer in the first place. So, something to consider when you're watching the movie. But anyway, that's all I got. Back to the review. Anyway, just some things to think about with this movie. It's while most of it is the build up for the action sequences, but it's kind of like the Terminator in that respect. In that the Terminator was not meant to be a thought provoking movie based on everything I've seen about it. It was James Cameron wanted basically like an unstoppable killer, but like a different angle to the slasher movies, essentially, and came up with Killer Robot from the Future. And may or may not have got some of those ideas from something written by can't remember who sued him, but they've got a thing in front of the more recent versions of the movie now. But anyway, but instead you wind up with this. Okay, so is it a time loop? What are the implications of someone's father being born after them in the future and then coming back in time, and they never meet as father and son in the past, but they do in the future when the son is older than the father. Like you get all these philosophical conundrums with that movie, even though they were never really meant to be, but they're interesting discussion points later on because it is science fiction. And whether he intended to or not, Cameron made a thought-provoking movie, even though a lot of it's just an excuse for action sequences and a murder machine, literal murder machine. It's called a Terminator. So, and I got the feeling that was, I don't know about the book because I've never read it, as far as Immortality Inc., but the movie was definitely like, hey, this is all great, and this will make for some interesting discussion later. But anyway, action with Emilio Estevez and Mick Jagger and a bunch of goons. So, yeah, that's the kind of movie you're walking into here. And it held up pretty well. I didn't see any effects that were really, look terrible. I mean, what we thought computer graphics were going to look like in 2008, 2009, we were a little off. But other than that, no, I thought it was a decent movie. It's probably a 6.5, 7, probably somewhere in there. Um, like I said, solid action. Most of the effects, it's mostly, car chases and bullets and explosions. You get a few shots that, yeah, it's kind of obvious that there's a blue or green screen involved, but not to the extent of even more recent movies, but most of it's practical. So it all still holds up because it was real world things actually being used. So on that front, it's pretty good. The action pieces are pretty good. Um, Competent acting, no real cringeworthy dialogue, no attempt to be cool in the future kind of weirdness that some movies go for. Um, Trying to predict trends decades away, as if you're ever going to guess that right. So yeah, definitely worth a watch. And again, like the other two, I found this one on Amazon Prime. It's probably on something else though, because it does have real actors in it, and it's a real movie. And I don't want to. I shouldn't say that because the other two are as well. But uh, this movie was a real studio release with production value and things like that. Is what I'm trying to say. This is not in like the B movie section. Now this is like A minus probably, but you know. Anyway, if you haven't seen it, check it out. And the next movie I'm going to be talking about is the movie Split Second with Rutger Hauer, which I only saw one time back in the 90s on HBO. So I just rewatched that. Johnny Mnemonic's getting pushed off a little bit. Might actually be a different Keanu Reeves movie before that. Because I tried to think if I can just continue this trend, and I just began to think of all kinds of 90s sci-fi action movies. And there's one that I've actually rewatched recently, and I'll rewatch again before I film something here. It's Chain Reaction. Now, it just ever so barely qualifies as sci-fi, but it does. So, yeah, I actually saw that movie in a theater. So, yeah. And yeah, so that's what's coming soon. Uh, like I said, I've already watched Split Second. I don't know if Chain Reaction is going to be the movie after that, but it is going to be in the near future here. And I've started to build a list. And if I'm doing just purely '90s sci-fi movies, there's another Keanu Reeves movie that's going to make an appearance too, but it's considerably more high profile than anything I've been talking about so far. Uh, Obviously, I mean The Matrix. So, but anyway, that's about all I got for you folks today. So let me know if you've seen this movie before, what you think of it. Are you going to watch it? If I've done everything right, there's an affiliate link to Amazon Prime down in the description. And again, like I said with the last movie, if somehow you're like, man, I just have to see this movie, so I'm going to subscribe to Prime or something, make sure it's actually on there before you do. Like, I don't want to sit here and tell you guys to do this and then, it's gone. Um, because, like I said, this movie had some stars in it, so it could easily wind up on one of the other streaming services. So, anyway, thank you folks for watching. And other than that, I guess that's it. So, I will see you folks later.